Is the president's leverage over Iran dwindling right along with our weapons supply? That is the question today. As the Washington Post reports, the Pentagon is ordering U.S. defense manufacturers to rapidly escalate production of weapons, including high-end air defense interceptors and long-range missiles that have been running low because of the war. At the same time, Iran has issued a sweeping set of demands just to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That includes lifting the U.S. blockade, paying war reparations, and releasing frozen Iranian assets. It is worth noting these demands just weeks ago were attached to nuclear negotiations, not the Strait, which was open and free before Trump's war. I want to bring in MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar and retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, former Commanding General of U.S. Army Europe, and an MS Now military analyst. It is good to see you both. Priya, first, just how dire is the situation with the weapons stockpiles?
Alicia, it's incredibly dire, regardless of what Trump administration officials want to say. We saw President Trump repeatedly trying to deny that these stockpiles were depleted and vowing on Truth Social to go after any of the treasonous individuals who are telling the press about these depleted stockpiles. But we know from analyses from nonpartisan think tanks here in Washington, D.C., like the Center for Strategic and International Studies, that if you look at things like THAADs, Patriots, and Tomahawks, we've used anywhere from 40 to 70% of our stockpiles. And really what's happening here is that it's causing U.S. commanders in the region to have to make incredibly difficult decisions that could put our troops in danger. They're having to decide how many missiles to launch to potentially try to intercept incoming Iranian missiles and drones. And so we saw over the weekend, as you mentioned earlier, Deputy Defense Secretary Steve Feinberg issue this memo to defense industry leaders telling them that, listen, the timelines here when it comes to rebuilding and replenishing our weapons is not fast enough. So you have 21 days to figure out a way to try to replenish these supplies in a faster manner. But we know, Alicia, that they're incredibly expensive and they typically take anywhere from 1 to 5 years to complete.
General, this has been an ongoing issue. You had the president on Sunday telling Axios the U.S. is, quote, low-keying it with Iran. I don't know what that means. He also said they are semi-negotiating with them. I also don't know what it means to semi-negotiate. I think what was notable was he didn't threaten to attack Iran again, as he usually does. I want to play you some of what we heard from the vice president over the weekend.
I try to remind people that we're really in the middle of the game here. This thing is not over. It's obviously not at the beginning. We're in the middle of the game, and we're applying a whole host of tools, diplomatic, economic, military tools, to ensure that we get the best outcome for the American people. I feel quite confident we will get there, but we're still a bit in the middle of the game.
General Hertling, what does that mean?
Yeah, Alicia, you know, you're confused as much as I am with some of the terms they're using. But if you don't mind, I'd like to start off by just congratulating Priya on her article. This was one of the finer pieces that I've read, and many of us in the military have been concerned about the use of this kind of precision weapon over the last 5 months for a very long time. When you talk about being in the middle of the game, and the vice president talks about the use of economic and information and diplomatic tools as well as the military, that will come as a surprise to a lot of people, because as you know, that's what we've been talking about the government should have been using from the very beginning, and they haven't. They're in the middle of the game now, and truthfully, based on the article that Priya wrote and what many of us know, the president's options have been reduced because of this expenditure of different ammunitions, the precision ammunitions. And, you know, having the Deputy Secretary of Defense writing a letter to various defense industries and saying, produce more and give me the options within 21 days is just ludicrous. As Priya just said, the weapons that we're talking about are not bullets, they are not artillery rounds that can be mass produced. These are precision weapons that require an extremely complex supply chain, very different material, rocket motors, GPS guidance systems, and it does take several months or years to build these. And the president has said many times, that he's ordered new plants being made, and the plants that make these rounds are going up. They're not. I've checked the defense industry. There are no new plants being established, and you can't just increase a production line of some of these precision weapons just because you tell them to do it. This takes an industrial base redesign, and it's going to take years to do it.
Priya, I have less than a minute left, but I'm very confused by the vice president saying we are in the middle of this, especially since it keeps feeling like one step forward, two steps back, especially the fact that the Iranians are now using the Strait of Hormuz no longer to negotiate over denuclearization, but rather to ask for a whole series of things that they want separate and aside from that. We are now 5.5 months in. Are we in a worse position than when we started?
Well, Alicia, the Iranians are watching what's happening to our stockpile and our military very closely, and they clearly feel like they are in a more powerful position, or else they wouldn't be making these demands that we haven't seen them make at all over the last 5 months. They're very well aware how low our stockpiles are. They're very